Tage, let's move on here to the Falcons against the Commanders. I think we should start with the Falcons offense against the Commanders defense. From the Falcons offensive perspective, they have a strong infrastructure. They have players that can win in multiple ways. They have Darnell Mooney, who has been a lot of fun just watching him run routes and just him consistently getting open. Of course, they have Drake London. And then you got Michael Penix Jr. in there, where his first game, I enjoyed it. And the stats, I'm not going to pretend like the stats are going to blow anyone away, but just watching the film, one, from first play, Zach Robinson, I think he knows he has just a wider menu of plays to call, where you get that boot, you get him throwing outside the numbers right away. And then you also have a ton of examples of Penix getting to his second read, throwing the ball over the middle, and really kind of killing the defense between the hashes. So that feels really fun. And then having Penix Jr. in there, I think it actually benefits Bijan Robinson a ton, because the linebackers have to be just, a touch slower to flow to the run, because they know that he can kind of boot out the opposite. And even if he's not just going to be running by defenders, Penix Jr., that is, in really any sort of way. Again, it gives Zach Robinson, I think, more tools to use, more answers to some of the defensive problems that he's going to face. And look, you can say, hey, the Falcons, their opponent in Penix Jr.'s first game wasn't the best defense by any means. And I think that's okay to say. Again, I'm going off what what I'm seeing on the film and kind of what I like there. So I think that makes it more fun to see him continue to try and do that, or how he's going to improve, what his kind of next pitch is going to be. And you know how much I love Liam Cohen and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, of course, but part of me wants to see the Falcons in the playoffs, so we just get more Michael Penix Jr. tape. So when we do the division previews next year, we're not only going off of just a few games, maybe just one extra one would be nice. What do you have here overall for the Falcons offense?
Yeah, I mean, you're a data guy at heart for just wanting a bigger sample size on Michael Penix Jr. going into next season. I love that. I love hearing that from you. I agree with you mentioning like the strong infrastructure that he's walking into as the new starting quarterback of the Falcons here, where you have Drake London, who is ninth among all pass catchers in ESPN's open score. So does a great job of getting open, is a good contested catch receiver. Darnell Mooney ranks 17th in yards per route run this year, as you can see on the sumersports.com data table. So like he's been someone who has been impressive as a wide receiver too. And then you have Bijan and Tyler Algier, who are 5th and 6th respectively in success rate when rushing the ball. The offensive line is good. So like now that they have a quarterback who can actually boot out, can move a little bit more in the pocket, like you can definitely be more excited about this Falcons offense. Like the best part of Penix, and you mentioned this in your Monday morning mashup in his debut, was he didn't take a sack despite being pressured 9 times in that game against the Giants. And so that's a trait that is carried over from college to the NFL. And then also, like you said, like him just being in the offense allows Zach Robinson to do more things as a play caller. And so we can see more of his play sheet expand because he has a quarterback who can move. There's a notion out there that Michael Penix Jr. is a mobile quarterback. He doesn't scramble that much. He isn't involved in the design rushing game, but he is just a quarterback who can move. He can move outside the pocket, can move around in the pocket if needed. And that helps the offense too.
Yeah, there's differences between this is a running quarterback, this is a mobile quarterback, this is a quarterback that can move. But to me, the most important thing, like pressure to sack rate, that was the stat of the year last year. I feel like, where you look at Penix Jr.'s numbers from Washington and you think, all right, is that going to translate? Is that the offensive line? Is it the offense? But to see him in game one get pressured a bunch and be able to take care of that kind of in a few different ways, that is a really, really positive thing that I hope that he's able to continue. Because whatever you think about his ceiling as a prospect or just as a player overall, kind of in this offense, to raise that floor by avoiding some of those negative plays, I really, really do like that. Let's move on here to the Commanders defense, of course, under Dan Quinn. For me, they are fun to watch. And Tage, maybe actually everyone's just fun to watch for me. That's something for a separate day, because I feel like I've said that a few times here. But so they'll send Frankie Louvo off the edge. They'll send him inside. Marshawn Lattimore, I think they're hoping can really solidify their cornerback spots. You get Mike Sanderson on the outside. I like that they haven't, bumped Sanderson inside at the nickel. They've said, hey, like we have a decent nickel right now. Let's keep him outside. There's obviously going to be a lot of value there. And, overall, they're not the greatest unit, though. I think Quinn does things that are exciting on the inside, whether it's, you pack the box, you get a little bit of a run stunt, you're on a third down, you're finding a way to break the pocket to force the quarterback to move right into your linebacker's hands. So, an interesting unit overall that I think will be fun for Penix to deal with. What do you have here for the Commanders defense?
Yeah, I mean, Commanders defense have definitely been an interesting unit to follow this year. The one thing that I keep mentioning about them is they are a run funnel, and I can't figure it out because like their pass defense is definitely worse from an EPA perspective than their run defense, but teams have loved running the ball against them. They have a negative 7.1% pass rate over expected this season. I think part of it is to do with their defensive tackles, being traded away last year, but that's definitely been something I've been tracking. Teams also like to throw deep on them. So once maybe Marshawn Lattimore gets settled in there, like you mentioned, like Mikey Sanistrell can move inside a little bit, play a position he's more comfortable with. Maybe that'll settle down a bit too. So some changing pieces on this defense later in the season, which is not usually what you see from a playoff team, to just add like a good corner and Lattimore, with just a couple weeks left in the regular season. But that'll definitely be something that could benefit them, later on, as like there could be less tendency tells than other defenses have.
I have to imagine, part of that run rate, as you mentioned, I think you can run on these guys inside. Also, just I don't actually have the full personnel breakdowns in terms of percentages and everything, but I think that they want to play light in terms of bodies. They want to
Mhm.
maybe not just boxes all the time, but we think back to a lot of the Cowboys defenses where you just get certain body types on the field. And then as we saw against the Eagles, once Jalen Hurts went out, they're able to get another linebacker on the field. They're able to play heavier. They're gonna have even like 6-1 look. So it's a fun unit, I think, overall from what they do sometimes from a schematic perspective, just because they're trying, right? They're really trying their best. They're going to throw something at the offense. What do you have here as a matchup you like for the Falcons offense against the Commanders defense?
Yeah, matchup I like for the Falcons offense is zone runs, and you mentioned this with how the Commanders can be got a little bit in the run game. The Falcons love to run inside zone and outside zone. It's the staple of their offense. They run the most of it in the league, and they're ninth in EPA per rush on those rushes. So it's definitely very justified to do those. And the Commanders haven't been great at defending those relative to league average. So I'm expecting a lot of those in this game, and it could be a big Bijan and Algier game, from both of those running backs. And even Udit from Sumer here, like was replying to one of my posts on Twitter yesterday about how like every kind of or rushing metric he's made has Algier showing up really highly there. So definitely a very good RB2, and even better than some other teams RB1s in the league. So excited to see him in this game.
Yeah, we really love Tyler Algier on this podcast for an extended amount of time. I'm really interested in those runs because, as I mentioned, against the Eagles, when the Eagles were running and Washington was just like their linebackers could play really fast to the running back, they had nothing holding them at all because Kenny Pickett wasn't going to be like planned keeping a bunch, or even if he did, you feel comfortable kind of falling back to that. And I think that if Michael Penix Jr. was not in, maybe you could look at the Falcons run game and say, look, we're not going to have a quarterback booting in the opposite direction a lot. We can be really ahead of the running back. We can play off the back and obviously the blocking scheme, as opposed to having to kind of be patient on that backside. I hope that we see a bunch of boot from the Falcons here, where you just give the linebackers just a touch extra to think about. That is enough sometimes to get your offensive line the right angles and to have a guy like Bijan Robinson, or of course, our guy, Tyler Algier, running. What do you have here as a positive matchup for the Commanders defense?
Yeah, so positive matchup for the Commanders defense in this game is, I don't have a ton of data on like Michael Penix in particular. So this is more of just like a personnel thing from the Falcons perspective, where when the Falcons play 12 personnel, they have not been good at it. They ran 100 plays of it this year, according to FTN data. They have the worst EPA among all teams when running 12 personnel. But they do it on about 10% of plays anyways. And like my whole reasoning behind this is like Kyle Pitts hasn't played that well this year. So even just having him on the field like is already a little bit of a disadvantage, and then adding another tight end with Pitts has definitely made this offense a little bit worse. I really like the Falcons when they just have more receivers out there on the field, and so Washington will probably have the upper hand in this game when they see two tight end sets.
I think we're both really excited in this game just to get another Michael Penix Jr. game. I think I assume that you agree that it's just like with the more that you can learn from a quarterback, and then like as we go
Mhm.
into next season, we're obviously gonna tie some of our thoughts on that going based on what we saw. So I assume that you agree that probably the most fun thing that we're looking forward to there for the Falcons offense is another Michael Penix Jr. start.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to keep, watching him, seeing how a lot of the skills that we saw in college translate to the NFL.
I love it. Another player that we've been super excited to watch all year as we move on here to the Commanders offense against the Falcons defense. I mean, Jaden Daniels, he's just a star. They've been strong enough on the offensive line. I thought that Cliff Kingsbury actually had some nice designs last week against the Eagles, particularly in that red zone area to take advantage of some of the ways that the Eagles want to play match coverages. So you can manufacture that by formation. You kind of know typically around what kind of check you're going to get from the defense. Then you have a beater to just take advantage of it. So I like seeing that from Washington. Daniels obviously is just solidly the rookie of the year. Hopefully Brian Robinson can bounce back from some of those fumbles last week. I think he's a strong running back. Daniels did have two rough interceptions in that last game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously the Commanders overall had 5 turnovers. I think that, you could, if an Eagles fan was to say, oh, they only won because Jalen Hurts got hurt. Like, I don't think we need to argue that, but still, like from a narrative perspective, it feels like how many star moments from Jay Daniels have we had this year? Thinking even all the way back to that throw against the Bengals. What do you have here overall for the Commanders offense?
Yeah, I mean, Commanders' offense is it's kind of back to where they were at the beginning of the season. They had a brief dip when Daniels was playing hurt with his rib injury. Just some a little bit worse offensive line play, but they're fourth in EPA per play on the season. Really good when passing and rushing. They're very personnel diverse, which is what I've loved about this offense this year. They're going to play a lot of 12, 21, even some 13 personnel, getting 3 tight ends out there on the field because they have the one true alpha receiver in Terry McLaurin, and they just have like they've kind of just pieced together the rest of their pass catching group with guys who can all like take turns, being the second best pass catching option on any given day. They really like throwing over the middle of the field, and they're really good at it. That's nice to see. The question I have for you is where do you kind of stand on the cliff right now? Based on what we saw in Arizona, with his offenses usually falling off towards the end of the year, and then what we're seeing right now with Washington, where his offense is kind of back to being what it was at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, these ones are hard because you try not to have like this is this like Sean McVay had this for a little while, right? Where it was like, oh, the
Mm-hmm.
first half of the season, like his offenses were performing at this, then later in the season they would drop off. Now, one, there's a natural drop off just because I don't know, you could point to things like it gets colder outside, there's more film out on the offense. I think maybe when you look at Kingsbury's offenses in other places, like in Arizona, they had just a ton of light bodies overall from the offense. So it felt like they couldn't turn to some types of runs. But in Washington, it feels like he's been pretty purposeful in playing kind of big boy football, like getting multiple tight ends on the field. You can be a little bit more creative in the run game. And as I mentioned, like I thought that he had just some really nice designs against Fangio's defense. So, what are the reasons for some of the offensive drop offs? I think you have to go kind of season to season. I do feel like him, obviously, a lot of it is on Jane Daniels. Like Jane Daniels is able to just kind of find answers for your team
Yeah,
overall,
yeah,
just by the way that he is able to play. I mean, like the 2 fourth downs, that conversions that you get from him. I mean, that doesn't have anything with the scheme. He's moving around. He's able to beat like 3 guys in space that never miss tackles. Like that's not on anyone other than Jane Daniels. Of course, he's in the structure of the offense. So I'm going to go ahead and punt that question, Tage, because I feel like I don't have a solid answer on that. I think just now in the context of this offense, where even when it felt like they were falling off a little bit, it's still like, there some of these schemes are kind of creative. Like I like what they're drawing up overall. It felt like this year was a little bit more tied to some of those Jaden Daniels injuries, like the last game against the Eagles. I mean, there's a few throws that he's just kind of dirting, and it felt like because he was hurt. Again, I want to mention that Jaden Daniels did have 2 interceptions against the Eagles. It's not like he played a perfect game. It's not like he is a perfect player overall. But again, still the rookie of the year. Tage, let's move on here to the Falcons defense. Not one that we have talked about a ton this year. I will say that. By no means a top unit overall. Of course, Jesse Bates is just always easy to point to him as a top end player. And when I think about some defenses, when they want to play single high and offenses throw on the outside, you wish that you had Jesse Bates in the middle of the field to really be able to work sideline to sideline, to be able to take care of some of those throws. And Bates has kind of won the Falcons some games. Of course, he was able to seal that win over the Eagles early in the season. Tage, what do you have here as some notes for the Falcons defense?
yeah. Falcons defense, by the stats, they're about league average in terms of EPA per play allowed. They're below average in terms of success rate. So they allow teams to sustain drives and kind of hope that Bates can cause a negative play to happen. And I thought Judah Fortgang in his newsletter, which everyone should subscribe to, throw the damn ball, is summarized the Falcons defense really well last week. He mentioned that they cannot generate pressure. They're bottom five in any pressure metric for most of the season. The secondary has begun to struggle a little bit, when defending explosives. So they've been bottom five for the last 6 weeks in that, and they've created a little bit of a pass funnel now where teams have liked to pass on them more. Obviously last week they were able to really key in on that and return the two defensive touchdowns. But in general, I'm definitely a little bit worried about the state of this Falcons defense.
And what are you looking at here as a matchup that maybe it's a fun matchup, maybe it's just a matchup you like overall from the Commanders' offense perspective?
Yeah, I mean, this is more of a fun matchup in general, but when Jaden Daniels is kept clean in this game, I think it'll be fun to watch him cook. He is the sixth best EPA per drop back when kept clean in the league this season. Like we just mentioned, like the Falcons don't put pressure on the quarterback that often, so hopefully he's able to stay clean a lot and not pressured. And I think he'll do a good job of finding his pass catchers downfield or scrambling when needed to.
It's certainly fun to watch him when he is kept clean. He throws such a nice deep outside,
Mhm.
vertical throw where it is so difficult for a cornerback to be able to guard that over and over. And then when the offense wants to get a little bit heavy, they know that the defense is going to roll a safety into the box. We're creating true one-on-one. So that is always fun. I'm excited just for more Jane Daniels play extension examples. I think they're always fun. There are times when it feels like he's running into sacks. I think that over his career, he'll be able to clean that up a bit and just find different ways to get out of that. And I mean, he is really fun to watch in the open field.